The first thing he noticed was the quiet. Not the silence of peace, but the strange, almost unreal quiet that comes when war suddenly stops being your world. Only a few weeks earlier, Otto Weiss had been crouching in a muddy trench somewhere near St. Lo, waiting for artillery that never seemed to end. The ground had shaken day and night. The air had smelled of smoke, cordite, and fear. Every sound had meant danger. Every shadow had meant death. Now he stood in the middle of a wide open field in northern France, hands raised, surrounded by American soldiers who looked younger than he had imagined. One of them was chewing gum. Another had a chocolate bar in his pocket. A third was laughing at something someone had said. Otto could not understand how they could laugh in the middle of a war. He had expected rage. He had expected revenge. He had expected brutality. Instead, one of the Americans handed him a cigarette. Otto stared at it, as if it were a trick. He had not seen a cigarette like this in months. German supplies had grown worse every week. Tobacco had been replaced by dried leaves, by whatever could be found. But this cigarette smelled rich and real. He hesitated. The American nodded and made a small gesture with his hand. It was not an order. It was an invitation. Otto took it. That was the first crack. The second came later, when they were marched past a line of American vehicles. Trucks, hundreds of them, stood in rows stretching beyond what he could see. Some carried fuel drums. Others were loaded with food. Others with ammunition. The ground beneath them was firm, laid with steel plates so the wheels would not sink in mud. Otto had been in the army since 1942. He had seen shortages everywhere. He had watched officers argue over a single fuel tanker. He had seen artillery units ration shells. He had seen wounded men die because transport had failed. And here the enemy had trucks like these waiting, not moving, waiting. He whispered to the man beside him, "Why are they not using them?" The man shrugged. He had no answer. The third crack came when he was given food. It was not extraordinary by American standards. A tray, metal, divided into sections. Meat, potatoes, bread, and something sweet. But Otto stared at it, as if it were a miracle. He had not seen so much food in one place in years. He did not eat at first. He waited. One of the guards laughed and gestured again. "Eat," he said slowly. Otto began. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. The realization did not come all at once. It came in fragments, in moments, in small observations that built on one another like bricks in a wall he could no longer ignore. Germany was going to lose. Not because of courage. Not because of bravery. German soldiers had plenty of both. He had seen men fight to the last bullet, to the last breath. But courage could not create fuel. It could not create food. It could not create trucks. As the days passed, the prisoners were moved to a temporary camp near the coast. From there, they watched ships arriving constantly. Liberty ships, tankers, transports. The sea seemed alive with movement. Otto had grown up near Hamburg. He knew ports. He knew ships. But he had never seen anything like this. It was as if an entire nation had turned toward the ocean and was pouring its strength across it without pause. He tried to count the ships one morning. He gave up. The men talked at night. Some still believed Germany had secret weapons. Others believed the Allies would argue and collapse. Others clung to rumors of divisions that did not exist. But fewer and fewer believed victory was possible. One evening, an older sergeant who had fought since Poland said quietly, "This war ended before we even knew it had begun." No one argued. When Otto was placed on a ship weeks later, he expected the worst. The journey across the Atlantic had always been described as a nightmare. He imagined darkness, hunger, beatings. Instead, he was given a bunk. He lay there the first night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The ship vibrated softly beneath him. Somewhere above, men walked and talked. The air smelled of food.
Food.
He laughed once, quietly, at the absurdity. War had become surreal. Meals came 3 times a day. Not rations. Meals. Bread that was fresh.
Soup that was hot.
Coffee that was real. The prisoners began to change. Not immediately. Suspicion remained. But hunger faded, and with it, something else began to fade too.
Fear.
One day, a guard tried to speak German. His words were broken and awkward. The prisoners laughed. The guard laughed too. It was a small moment, but it mattered. When they arrived in America, Otto stepped off the ship into sunlight that seemed brighter than any he had known. He had imagined a hostile land. Instead, he saw order.
Clean docks.
Efficient movement. Endless cranes lifting cargo. He noticed something else. There were no ruins. No bombed buildings. No shattered streets. The train journey inland changed him more than anything else. He pressed his face to the window like a child. Cars filled the roads. Farms stretched for miles. Towns passed by untouched. He whispered, "Where is the war?" The man beside him said nothing. They began to understand that Germany had not just been losing battles. Germany had been losing a war of production, of organization, of endurance. In the camp, life settled into routine. Work, meals, sleep. Some prisoners worked on farms. Others in factories. Otto picked apples in autumn and shoveled snow in winter. He earned small wages. He bought chocolate. The first time he tasted it, he nearly cried. Letters arrived from home. His mother wrote of hunger, of cold, of air raids, of neighbors who had vanished. He did not tell her about the chocolate. He did not tell her about the meat. He did not tell her about the warm barracks. He felt guilt, but also relief. In the evenings, they talked about the future. At first, there was none. Only survival. Only the hope of returning.
But slowly something changed.
They began to imagine a different Germany. A Germany without war. Without fear. Without lies. Some attended classes. English, mathematics, history. Otto learned words slowly. He struggled. But he persisted. One night, an American officer spoke about democracy. Otto listened with skepticism. But later he read newspapers. He saw criticism of leaders. He saw debate. He saw disagreement. In Germany, such things had meant prison. Here, they meant freedom. The realization was painful. Everything he had believed had been incomplete, distorted, shaped by fear and control. The war ended. The announcement came quietly. No celebration. Only a strange stillness. Some prisoners wept. Some stared. Some prayed. Otto felt only exhaustion. Years later, when he returned to Germany, he found ruins. Cities destroyed. Families broken. Futures uncertain. But he also carried something with him. Perspective. He had seen another way of living. Another way of organizing a society. Another way of treating enemies. He spoke about it to anyone who would listen. Not everyone wanted to hear.
Some called him weak.
Some called him a traitor. But others listened. And those who listened helped build a new nation. Decades passed. The memories did not fade. In old age, Otto returned to the place where he had once been held. The camp was gone. In its place stood modern buildings, roads, trees planted long after the war. He stood quietly. A young soldier approached and asked if he needed help. Otto smiled.
"No," he said.
"I only came to remember." He looked across the landscape and thought of the trucks, the ships, the food, the small kindnesses that had changed his life. War had taught him destruction. Captivity had taught him something else. That strength was not only measured in weapons. It was measured in how you treated those who had once been your enemies. He left that day with a strange peace. The world had nearly destroyed itself, but it had also learned. And as long as stories like his were told, perhaps it would remember. If you found this story meaningful, take a moment to like and share. It helps these forgotten histories reach more people. Subscribe for more untold stories from the past, because every story carries lessons for the future. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Our community spans the world, united by the belief that history still matters today.